All right, welcome on to Hollinger and Duncan. We'll let our rooms populate here. I'm going to just send out a little tweet letting people know that we are live. And then we'll do some thumbnail faces, and then we will do a podcast. All right. Sixers getting Paul George. Your facial reaction to that? John can't make a facial reaction right now because he's frozen. All right, we'll try to get him back in here. All right, John's internet cracked out. This has been a nice nice morning. We were going to start at 12 Pacific, and then I discovered a gas leak, so I had to go turn off the gas at my house, and we're going to wait for a repairman. And now John's internet is gone, so couldn't have happened, of course, before I hit go live. There's no way. So I guess I'll take a couple of comments, like while we're waiting. If anyone wants to break in with a something they want my thoughts on, hopefully something very obscure. Laker fan, do not believe the hype that Braun was taking a pay cut. He knew they weren't getting anyone, but got to make it seem like he tried. Yeah, that occurred to me as well. I think LeBron. It's funny, right? Because either way, and wow, this is actually, I look hilarious right now with just being in the middle of our little frame. Let me take that off while we're waiting for John to get back in. No, actually, I don't think I have a way to do that. So, at least not that I know. So here, why don't I do this? There we go. This is amazing radio right now. All right. So the thing about John or LeBron taking a pay cut, I don't know. They apparently offered Klay a contract, and for more than the Mavs did. We'll see. Maybe if DeRozan comes, LeBron will have to take a pay cut. If they can move D'Angelo Russell to do that, we talked about this very extensively on Dunked On. LeBron could still get into the mid 40s potentially, even if they only offer DeRozan the mid level. Mike Scotto reported Philly is interested in Quinones. Do you think he could help? Yes, I do. I do think so. In fact, I think that's a good minimum signing because I thought he showed some ability to guard the ball and he can shoot and at least like be competent as a driver. I think one of the big improvements to his game under the radar over the last couple of years is he's learned to play really hard. And so that if you can shoot and play hard and not just be a complete disaster on defense, it's not bad. Let's see here. Favorite under the radar signing. I mean, I think there are a lot of guys I thought were underrated that ended up just going back to their incumbent teams, even though there wasn't necessarily the most obvious path to playing time, like Gary Harris and Batadze are certainly in that group. Aaron Holiday, I thought, was actually one of the better point guards available on the market. I probably actually should have moved him up in my free agent rankings to reflect that. So those would be some of the ones that I would point to. I think the Suns losing Eric Gordon actually kind of matters. And obviously Philly getting him for the minimum is useful. Landing spots for Gary Trent Jr. Let's see, is John back yet? I gotta send him a new podcast recording link too. Give me a second here. Yeah, I'm certain he has salary expectations at 25, coming off like making almost 20 million. Yeah, is that right? Is he 25? It might be 26. He is 25. Yeah, that's amazing that he's only 25 still. Seems like he's been around forever. But if there's a feeling that his market is the full mid-level, I just don't see who that team is right now. And so is he going to have to go somewhere to kind of rebuild his market? I'm trying to think of where that would be. And he would actually, I'm trying to think of where he would be a great fit. And it's not because he's not really like a pure shooter. He wants to kind of dribble inside the arc, take some more mid-rangers, doesn't really pass. Defense hasn't been as good as it was. I think San Antonio could use him because they just have no shooting whatsoever. And Toronto could use him too, but they only have now about 10 million or so below the tax. I would imagine they would bring him back for a salary that wouldn't put them in the tax. But there is not an obvious landing spot for him unless you're starting to talk about, kind of like $5 million a year or below, $7 million a year or below. I think he would be a good fit in LA. Although I don't know if LeBron's taking a pay cut for him. Probably not. Indiana could maybe use him. Like they've got a little room below the tax still. Clippers could certainly use more shooting. Memphis could use more shooting. I'm not sure if I would like him or Kennard better in Memphis. Probably him because Kennard just can't stay healthy at all. Even though Kennard might be a little bit better. But I also Trent's better defensively than Kennard is. He's not just a complete disaster. But yeah, in terms of like a starting slot, certainly, I mean, if maybe Milwaukee could say, yeah, we can only offer you the minimum, but you'll start here. Maybe that would be what it would be for him. Still waiting on John to come back. We may have to just restart this another time. All right, he says he's back. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you. We are live right now.
Okay, cool.
If you want to jump in the podcast recording as well, we can get rolling here. This has been I answered a few questions.
You sent me the new link. Okay, I got it here. All right. All right. So I think you should have me in both now.
Excellent. All right, let's do a podcast here.
Sure.
We're gonna skip. We'll skip the faces. The thumbnail can be me with just like the black bar in front of my face. All right, here we go. Welcome on to a very special free agency edition of Hollinger and Duncan, and we are doing this pod publicly both on Twitter and YouTube, and of course you can listen in your podcast player. But if you want to get every Hollinger and Duncan, you want to get every Dunked on Prime with Nate Duncan and Danny Leroux, you want to get every chair adjustment sound that John Hollinger makes on the podcast, either publicly or on Dunked on Prime. If you want to get access to our constantly updating salary sheets, free agent rankings, Seth Partnow stats, there's a lot of great stuff that we're going to have available on Dunked on Prime, Dan Feldman's Daily Dunks, and our sale for 25% off. You can either get 25% off a month, or you can get 25% off a year using the code MOCK offseason 2024. That's only going to be available for another 2 days. So I highly recommend that you check that out and get basically our lowest price ever with that promo code MOCK offseason 2024. So John, let's start with this. What would you say is the most surprising thing that has happened over the last, we'll call it this transaction period, since the draft? You and I recorded the day after the draft.
Yeah. So first of all, can you hear me okay? Because my mic just decided to go rogue.
Did we lose you again?
My mic just decided to go off on its own.
All right, let me send you a new link to the recording software again. That was such a good intro too. I did such a good job with the promo.
Yeah, this one is cursed. Jesus.
Yeah, I told everyone about my gas leak while you were gone too. All right, I'll send you yet another link to the recording software. 1 second, because it's not going to recognize you. Or yeah, okay, 1 sec. It's fine. We're not live or anything. This is no one will ever know that this happened. All right, I just sent you the new link again.
The new link? Okay. All right. Come on. Here we go. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
All right.
You guys still getting feedback on my side? Yeah, the problem was I think we just have two windows that are open, one for video and one for the audio recording. So I had to unmute John's tab in the video to hear him, and whatever. Anyway. All right, let's start recording again, John. You just pick up when I asked you what the most surprising thing was? Just when you see it start recording, go for that.
I actually think the most surprising thing was that the Clippers actually let Paul George go. That they weren't willing to do the fourth year, that they held firm on giving him the same deal that Kawhi did, which had been their position going back months and months. But I thought when their feet got held to the fire in free agency that they would ultimately capitulate, and they did not. And I think that is clearly the work of the second apron and the more punitive repeater tax right there, that in the old environment, the Clippers would have just said, screw it.
I found that explanation lacking, personally. I think, because what difference does the fourth year make to that, right? Like if you want to say, hey, we can't afford to re-sign you at all, we got to stay out of the second apron, then why do you make the Harden deal? Why do you then still offer Paul George presumably the same as what Kawhi got, or slightly less? Like, you're still going to be into the second apron or very close to it unless Harden took a big haircut. So if the big standoff was over the fourth year or potentially a no trade, Woj also reported that they wouldn't offer him the no trade in the 3-year deal. Maybe that's something that could have got him to stay. And if you're PG and you don't get the no trade, why would you stay? Because the entire point of staying is that you like LA. It's not about the team. Like, they're not winning a championship. You want to just make a bunch of money and play in LA and be decent and, go into the Intuit Dome and, get your number retired by the Clippers or whatever. But it's not about winning a championship to stay there. So if you don't get the no trade, there's no reason to stay, in my opinion. So why not just pick your destination in free agency rather than just getting traded somewhere inevitably? So, and I think that was it was pretty clear. And, given this regime's history with Blake Griffin, I think Paul very obviously did not feel the love. But I didn't think that the second apron restrictions, I just didn't think that was remotely compelling, because they still offered him enough that they would be going into the second apron for 3 years in theory, or they would have had to make a move. And we can't take stuff back from Golden State because then we would also be in the second apron like that. I think they could have figured out a way around that, and B, just that they could have, they should have been willing to take guys on and then maybe move some money or whatever, if they could have actually gotten something back for Paul George in a sign and trade from Golden State. So I think they just, I don't understand ultimately what they were thinking. The only plausible explanation that I have is just they offered Kawhi Leonard this contract. They thought it was a big coup. Maybe they promised Kawhi that no one was going to get more than him, and Kawhi is prickly like that. And then it cost him Paul George, which is just that's all just so dumb.
You wonder what was said at that time when Kawhi did his deal, because it was a little more favorable to the Clippers than maybe people expected, right? And so yeah, was there a promise that like we're going to offer you and PG the same thing, but they should have done them both at the same time if that was the case. So
yes, absolutely. I mean that was just like, apparently according to Ramona's, I think it was her reporting, there was some discussion that like Kawhi's like, oh, I'm going to extend, and PG was like, okay. And, there wasn't like, oh, Kawhi's going to take less, and now you also have to take less. Like the fact that there wasn't any coordination on that, it was really, it was surprising to me. I thought ultimately they would just cave, because it's just like, what else are you doing, right? Like if you hadn't made the Harden trade, to me, this decision would actually make more sense. Now that you've made the Harden trade, you're totally pot committed to this group. Yeah, it's not going to be a championship contender, but you'll at least be decent as you go into the Intuit Dome. But you're out your draft picks until 2029 now.
Yeah, to give up draft picks to Philadelphia for them to then create enough cap room to pluck Paul George from your roster. That's a tough one, right?
Well, and Daryl, again, as much as he's been criticized for like, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, what he's done in Philly, where they were after the Horford signing with the Ben Simmons that was about to turn into a pumpkin, to draft Tyrese Maxey, 4 years later be able to use his small cap hold to get Paul George, to turn Ben Simmons into Harden, into assets, into Paul George, and then to still have more assets to improve the team after getting him. I mean, it's really just incredible work by him.
Yes, and they're set up to do some more shenanigans here too. So it's still going to get interesting here in Philly, I think.
What do you think they need still? What would be, with your, realistically, what would be your target there? They can take on more money with Paul Reed. They got some first apron concerns obviously there too, but just generally, what archetypes are you targeting for them?
They need a starting four. I think that's the thing, most clearly. And they don't necessarily need it today, though. They need it in April, right? Like they're good enough to win a bunch of regular season games in the East either way, right? But
yeah.
So I wrote about this for The Athletic just before. There's a scenario where they're not capped by the first apron, where they are capped by the second apron, and sign Kenyon Martin Jr. to a $20 million deal. And then use him as a trade exception in season, because they can sign Kelly Oubre with cap space, put Andre Drummond into the taxpayer exception, and then operate from there.
Ah, yes, that is very interesting, and the fact that was reported as exactly that number is rather fascinating. So you're saying it's rather than Oubre in the room exception, which he would fit into, yeah, you instead use the tax on Drummond. That's really good, actually. I like that one, and
yeah,
we'll see. I don't know. Do you think Kenny Martin would accept that though?
It's tough to say. It would be the Bruce Brown special, obviously. It would be, $20 million the first year and then team option for the second year. It could be any amount up to $20 million that the Sixers were comfortable with, basically.
Well, and you think he would agree to waive his implied no trade for $20 million? Would he do that?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yeah, it would be hilarious if he signed that deal and then at the end was like, no, you can't trade me. That would be amazing.
And clearly, just to explain this more to people, the reason this would work is Kenny Martin Jr. has a minimum cap hold coming off a minimum contract.
And full bird rights, because it was a 3-year minimum contract or whatever it was.
Yeah, so they can bump him up after doing all their other business. He only counts at the minimum, and then you can bump him up to 20 million,
Yes.
or whatever number they would want to do, and it behooves them to get that number as high as possible, because you could even then, uh, you wouldn't want to be in a situation where you had to take back more money. You would want to take
Yeah,
back
as
less,
because they'd
because
be
then
a
you get a hard
second.
cap of the first
Yeah,
apron.
they'd be a
Yeah, I think
second
that's
apron
probably,
team.
yeah.
They'd be a second apron team, and so they could trade him for the same or less money, but not more.
Yeah, and I agree they need a 4. Their rebounding, I think, is going to be a problem, although the Knicks aren't quite as good at that, as they were in the past, having lost Hartenstein. Yeah, we haven't even discussed the Bridges trade yet, have we? Or no, that happened before the
Yeah,
draft, right?
yeah, we got
Yeah,
that
okay.
one.
All right. Yeah, God, I can't even remember anymore. Yeah, we got to talk about Murray, obviously. That's the big trade that we got to hit too. But yeah, I think like a rebounder, I mean, Nick Batum obviously would have been a great fit there. I think he just really wanted to be back in LA. That's my interpretation of that. And so I'm trying to think, in terms of free agency, you're thinking they're probably just mostly on the minimum market at this point. What do they have if they take
They could
Oubre?
they could
So
they
you think they
could
just, yeah.
use they could use $5 million on, like, would that be enough to get Kyle Lowry back? I don't know, but they could technically sign a $5 million contract first. Now, the other option they have to improve the team right now, this would cap them at the first apron, though, would be to do things more traditionally, how everyone thinks it's going to go, with Oubre into the room exception. Trade Paul Reed, non-guaranteed, 7.7 million, for somebody who makes up to about 15 million. They can go without hitting
Yeah.
the first apron. So that would be the other pathway for them.
Yeah. Now Reed, of course, would have to guarantee in that scenario, but that's fine for the team. At least for this year, you would have to guarantee.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think you're better off just holding on to Reed at this point. Or if you do trade him, you don't trade him for someone making more than him, because that's going to hard cap you.
Well, you could do the Reed move, or you could do the Reed move or the Martin move. You have to cut Paul Reed to do the Martin shenanigans.
Why is that?
You can't fit in Kelly Oubre into your room otherwise.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I got you. So, yeah, I mean, how good is this Philly team? Are you like, I mean, obviously we know the health questions. I probably won't be picking them in the East just because of that.
Yeah.
Until Joel Embiid makes it through a playoffs being his dominant self, I will never pick the Sixers to win a championship at the start of the season. Maybe if he's totally healthy at the start of the playoffs, I might consider it. But we'll assume, yeah.
Clearly, Boston is still the team to beat, right? Like, this is not on Boston's level yet. What Philly has, are they on the level of New York, Milwaukee, Indiana? I think it's fair to say they've kind of pulled themselves back up into that discussion with those teams.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, we'll see how they can fill out the roster. And they have still plenty of assets that they can fire away. They can still fire, I think, 4 first rounders. And they've also got Jared McCain that they could move. Let's see. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's, and they got some swaps available as well for way out. And yeah, I mean, this is just an incredible work by Daryl Morey. I mean, he can't have known that Paul George was coming when he was going through all this, but he prioritizing the 2 birds in the bush over the bird in the hand worked out really well for him. And hey, you know what? Like, oh, James Harden says he's a liar. No one was ever going to come to Philly. Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, that
his
was
own teammate.
I think,
yeah,
yeah, and I think. Yeah, and got away from him as well. And there were rumors that PG wasn't like so ecstatic about playing with Harden. I don't think I would be either. But it is. I do think that Daryl, like Sam Hinkie, went too far in this direction. But Daryl, I think that teams generally are just too concerned about, oh my God, what's everyone going to think? No one's ever going to come here, et cetera, and they give up too many advantages. And Daryl just doesn't do it. I mean, he got Tyrese Maxey to sign a full 5-year deal. He didn't even get a 4+1, even after Maxey had to wait this long.
I was blown away by that.
Blown away by that.
Right. That was unbelievable to me. So I don't know if they scripted that out in advance or what, but that was wild to me.
So David asked, are the Sixers going to have base year issues with the Kenyon Martin signing? What base year is if you give a guy a huge raise, essentially he only counts for half of his salary outgoing. They will not have those issues if they trade him at the deadline. If they were to sign and trade him right now, they would. And then they also would be hard capped again because they're taking back more than they're sending out. So what we're envisioning is you sign him, then you make the trade December 15th. I guess they would use full bird, so it'd have to be after January 15th. And then, he's basically, it's just a huge walking trade exception, and you can use him to take back, another $20 million player, a Kuzma type or something like that.
Yes. To use some of those first they got from the Clippers.
Okay, let's see here. So, and that's a home run. Yeah, I think I probably would like, I think I like Philly more than the Knicks. Boston, it's just their style is so hard to deal with. But if Porzingis isn't healthy, no, I mean, I think, and he's going to be out 5 to 6 months. And like, he's another guy, like, can you really count on him to be healthy at the end of the season?
Yeah. And then you have Porzingis health and then Horford old. So, and those bigs are really key to what Boston does. So I think that is the vulnerability there without a doubt.
Oh man. All right. What's like your next thing you're most, actually, I have one point I want to make.
Sure.
I mean, both the top of the East and the top of the West are looking amazing again this year. And I just hope we can have fewer injuries this year in the playoffs, that we can really see these teams at full strength. I mean, on paper in July, like, I'm just so excited for all these series. And when you actually get there, they're always fucking injured. Like, it just sucks. Like, can we just, I mean, it's shortening the season, whatever needs to happen. Like, we just, like, the NBA's product in the playoffs, half the playoff series were basically unwatchable because you knew one of the teams didn't have a chance because they weren't healthy.
Yeah.
Like, the 65 game rule was great for the first 50 games of the season. Everyone played, and then everyone breaks down for the last 30 games. So I hope that teams kind of learn their lesson and do, like, we're at least a little healthier in 22 and 23. So let's try to focus on that.
How different is this discussion, by the way, if Kawhi doesn't hurt his knee in that first round against Dallas? I mean, maybe the Clippers lose
anyway.
Maybe the Clippers lose anyway. But
well, if you want to turn injuries off, then you got to do it for Luka in that series too. I picked Dallas in that series, assuming that Kawhi was even going to be like. I think that Clippers team just was not built very well. Like, they just didn't have enough shooting.
Yeah, I had Dallas in that series too.
Let's talk about the Murray deal, actually, unless there's something else that is really like sticking in your craw that you want to.
No, let's go. Yeah, let's talk about my Hawks here.
Let's start with this. Like, do you have an opinion on, like, at least as of now, who won that trade?
I don't know if it's some trades. It's tough to define as win or lose. I mean, to me, Atlanta getting out with 85 cents on the dollar or whatever they got was probably a better than median outcome, I would say. Like, I wasn't necessarily
85 cents on the dollar for what they gave up
to San Antonio. Yeah.
I don't know that I can characterize it as that high, because your own draft picks are just so much more valuable.
Just because you control your direction the way.
Yeah.
That's why Brooklyn reacquired theirs, obviously, in that Houston deal. Yeah, I mean, the Hawks are still sort of committed to chasing averageness for 3 years because they don't have control of their own picks. But they have managed to reset themselves to a younger team. They got 2 firsts. They got Dyson Daniels. I love the fit of Dyson Daniels on this roster. Can play some backup point. Gives them a real, legit, good wing defender, where containing the ball was such a problem for this team. So I think he's going to fit in really well there. Obviously, put him with Jalen Johnson. Reese Shea hopefully is good. We'll see what they get from Kobe Buffkin. But there's like this like kind of young generation for the Hawks. So there's some reason to be excited about that. You're right that if they really wanted to do this, the way you do it is trade to San Antonio and get those picks back. And I just don't know if that's realistically on the table. I actually don't know what trades that really get them a Bridges type return. Like, I just don't know that those are out there for them right now. And that's one of the reasons they pivoted back to Murray.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. And I think Trey is more of a floor raiser than DeJounte is if you aren't getting your picks back. And I'm sure they went down those roads. And I think the Spurs made the right choice in not acquiescing. At least, I don't know what a fair thing would have been there. I think New Orleans did pretty well. I think Dyson Daniels is overrated. I guess his fit is okay because they just don't have anyone else who can defend anyone in the perimeter. But I think his fit offensively with Trey is bad. He
fits the Hawks a lot better than he fit the Pelicans. The Pelicans already had defenders and couldn't really play with another non-shooter. So it was okay to me that they put Daniels in that deal as a sweetener because I don't think it was ever going to happen for him in New Orleans.
No, and he extending him if he did break out wasn't going to fit into their salary structure, which they have major issues. No, I love the trade just from the assets given up for New Orleans. I was saying from Atlanta's standpoint, I think Daniels is overrated. Like, to view him as like a big get here is not like particularly compelling for me. And to also the fact that it's the worst of New Orleans and the Bucks in 27 rather than the better of those two, or even just straight up one of them, or straight up the Bucks maybe. That I think is kind of what takes me. I don't think the Lakers are going to be like so bad. Like, maybe they're in the lottery. Like, it's very unlikely that's a pick that really ends up mattering.
Yeah, it'll be
unless they trade for Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, it'll be in the 14 to 20 range, right? Like, that's probably what we're looking at.
You would think so. So, and then DeJounte's fit in New Orleans, like, I think it's fine. It's just good cost certainty for a very similar player, I would say, to Brandon Ingram. But I think he actually shoots a little bit more than Ingram, at least off the ball these days. But he also is just a point guard, and I think if you move him back to point guard, he's a defensive plus, whereas Ingram's like kind of a defensive minus on the wing. The fit of him and Zion isn't great. So this now gives you the ability to move CJ or move Brandon Ingram and have cost certainty that'll fit into your salary structure going forward.
Yeah, to me, this is tell me you're trading Brandon Ingram without telling me you're trading Brandon Ingram, right? Like, this is so obviously a precursor to trading Brandon Ingram. They haven't executed the trade yet, so they may stuff this into one mega trade if they do an Ingram trade relatively soon.
Mega
trade with a mega trade exception too, because like with Murray's trade kicker, there is a little bit of like uncertainty here. He has to either take less or they have to put another body into the deal. So we'll see how that ends up getting worked out.
Who wants Brandon Ingram right now? It seems like maybe the end game with Markkanen has to play out first because these teams would rather have Markkanen, as would I.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's probably going to end up being a fake game with Markkanen if we know the history there, but we'll see. Maybe there's enough of an asset play on the table that the Jazz say, screw it. Utah's at a weird point because, they can't play another 50-game season again, right? Like, you have this guy in his prime, like, you have to either try or you have to move on, I think. And I do wonder if they're getting some pressure from Markkanen's camp. Like, no, we're not just going to renegotiate and extend unless you give us a reason to stay here. So I wonder how much that plays in too.
Yeah, the Markkanen thing is fascinating to me. And it fits into a larger trend that I want to talk about it in a second. But I think there is more pressure on Utah to get a deal done because of this 25 draft. Frankly, because Will Hardy has been such a good coach that I think they just thought they were going to suck these last 2 years, and he's made it work by just putting together various lineup house of cards over the course of the season. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think if they can't, like, I mean, there's talk, they wanted to like trade for Bridges, then also try to sign Paul George and free agency and like, build up a team that was going to be really good. I think that just ultimately was probably not going to happen. And that's also, I mean, nobody leaks about things that they were trying to do better than Danny Ainge does.
Oh, it's a tradition unlike any other.
I mean, if he was, it's just the only thing that's reduced it now is the fact that he's in Utah instead of Boston, and there just isn't as much media to leak it to.
Exactly.
And people, also they're just not as good too. There's not as much interest. But I mean, let me ask you this though, from Utah's perspective. Let's say the Golden State Warriors offer their best possible package that doesn't include Jonathan Kuminga. So that's Gary Payton and Looney, just totally expiring salary, and then every draft pick that the Warriors can offer. You doing that deal?
The Warriors and Kings can both do 2 picks and 4 swaps, it looks like. So...
Well, the Warriors could get to 3 if they just offer the top 20 of their 2030 pick, too. They could do 26, 28, and the top 20, which frankly is all anybody cares about anyway.
Yeah. I would probably ask for Kuminga, knowing that Markkanen is taking his spot anyway, and the Warriors have to pay him. Are the Warriors going to pay Kuminga and Markkanen both? I would
Yeah,
ask.
I think that. I mean, they probably would if they really like their team that much.
Because to me, if you're Golden State, you want pods with that group more than you want Kuminga, right?
No, I think I want Kuminga. I like pods he's like a third guard to me.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I know the stats on him are really good, but like, what is he just doesn't do anything at an elite enough level. Like if he just could guard the ball a little bit better, or if he was just a little bit more of a shooter, or a little bit more of like a driver and distributor, like he's a great third guard because he kind of fits in either guard spot next to guys, but he doesn't do any of the things that you need as a starting 1 or a 2 well enough, and doesn't project well enough. Like I'm just not sure. I was even having this conversation with someone in the Warriors organization, and I was like, okay, well, what should he be working on? I'm like, yeah, I don't know what's like, which of his skills is like that much more projectable. Mm-hmm. So they didn't feel that way, obviously, but that was my opinion on it.
Huh. Okay. On the other hand, you have pods at $3 million and Kuminga at $30 million or whatever next year, when you're already expensive. I don't know. It's an interesting. That's an interesting one. I love the Melton deal, by the way. I thought that was tremendous.
Yeah, me too. That was great. Yeah, that was a great under the radar signing. I think he might actually, not for sure, but I think he actually might help them more than Klay would have this year.
Oh, I totally think that. Like, not even close.
Okay. I mean, should we elaborate on that?
Yeah, I just think Klay with the Warriors versus what Klay's going to be in Dallas aren't necessarily the same thing. And I mean, we saw the movie the last 2 years, what Klay is with the Warriors right now. And that there are times it's really good, but like in terms of his defensive liabilities, his kind of wanting to create more than you probably really wish he would. I mean, that's going to go away in Dallas. He's just going to be straight off the ball all the time, right?
Yeah. Well, and people are like, well, okay, what is Steph going to do now? He's going to get totally worn out. It's like Klay didn't create offense like that, right? Like they're going down, they can't score against the Kings, and Klay goes 0 for 10, but maybe the most damning thing is he only gets up 10 shots, right? Like, so he's not really like taking some big burden off of Steph.
And he doesn't create anything for anyone else either.
Yeah, but if I'm the Warriors, though, I ultimately probably would be willing to put Kuminga in that deal. I would try very hard to keep him out of it. And, then Danny Ainge can say, all right, well, we got everything else except for Kuminga, just like they did for Gobert with, keeping McDaniels out of it, which as it turned out, keeping McDaniels out of that deal ended up being pretty important for the Wolves. So,
Hmm.
well, and the other thing that I think people aren't talking about is Markkanen has some control over this now, because wherever he goes, it's not going to be a place that can renegotiate and extend him. That's the appeal of staying in Utah to him,
Yes.
is getting paid. And for Utah, you might say, just from the asset standpoint, maybe he's worth as much or more if you renegotiate and extend him, and then try to trade him later. I don't know that his value is going to go down, but then there is the issue of just the choosing a direction for 2025. So, but Markkanen, he can say, yeah, like he can't extend, so he's gonna get to free agency, and that's an issue for a team potentially trading for him. And so,
Yeah,
like,
because he
if
could
he
say,
wants to be in Golden State, he
don't.
can pull that lever.
Yeah, he could say, or on the opposite, obviously, don't acquire me. I'm leaving after the year.
Okay, let's so Ingram, I
We
mean,
gotta talk about we gotta
there's
talk
still
about the Thunder, right?
we do. I just want to finish up on Ingram briefly. I think, I mean, the Pels have to get a center. I mean, they either got to move McCollum or Ingram to do that. I mean, maybe they could just get a body at the minute. Like, they don't face any financial pressure for this year necessarily. And you could even, like, keep Ingram and Murray together if you could just get off of CJ next summer. That would be doable. So you could go into this year and just see what it looks like with all these guys, and just, not prioritize center too much. But
You'd have to pay like $3 million in luxury tax, though. You're not allowed to do that in New Orleans.
well, yeah, I mean, can they reacquire Kyra Lewis and then trade him?
Ouch. But you're right. I mean, they could go into the season. It's not ideal. They could go into the season with Ingram.
Yeah, and they could figure out how to get out of the tax just by, like, move Matt Ryan to another team and sign a guy for a minimum. Same thing with Jeremiah Robinson Earl, or Alvarado would have positive trade value. If they don't see Jordan Hawkins in their plans, they could probably move him as well. Okay, yeah, let's talk about OKC, and maybe we can even just fold this into like a general West power rankings discussion. I don't think that Denver is necessarily done yet, and maybe they can do something at the trade deadline. Obviously, they lost KCP though. Dallas loaded up. We can fold that in. OKC, Minnesota gets Dillingham. I don't know how much he's going to help them this year, but I mean, that top four is certainly looking pretty solidified now at the top of the Western Conference. How do you see that shaking out?
I think Oklahoma City and Dallas are probably a notch above the other two right now. Just with the pieces they've added. I mean, OKC, A, they'll have the learning from this past playoffs. B, they just look more playoff viable to me now with another real big, somebody who can rebound, and getting Caruso. Like, defensively, they're just going to be so solid. It's going to be ridiculous.
What do you make of the idea that Hartenstein kind of compromises the way they want to play with the five out?
I think he adds to the way they want to play, because they don't. The thing they ran into was that there are certain opponents where playing five out and just spamming guard pick and rolls only get you so far, and you need to be able to play different ways at different times. And I think Hartenstein gives them that. He gives them a true roller, a guy who can short roll if they're doubling Shea, and make really good decisions. Like, I think he's just so much more potent in that role than Jalen Williams, YLIN, Jalen Williams. And then the other thing with Hartenstein, I mean, they got their asses kicked on the glass last year, and Hartenstein obviously is a very good rebounder, and I think there are some situations where that will really help them. Obviously, you can alternate him and Chet. Chet shoots it well enough that you can play them together. It's not ideal, but you'll probably see that, kind of like second units maybe, where they run 5 minutes.
I think they're going to
together.
start Hartenstein. I think they'll bring Caruso off the bench.
Wow. You see, I was wondering if Caruso would start ahead of Dort.
I mean, I think they want to keep Caruso's minutes down. That's probably what it is.
Yeah, and Caruso will miss 20 games anyway, so yeah, that might be the decision. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, but I just think like if you're gonna play Hartenstein and Chet together, I think you're gonna really struggle to score.
it's going to be harder. I'm trying to think how the because you at least I mean the one thing that changes is you can't put your five on Giddy anymore. Like your five has to guard Hartenstein, right?
Well, or he could guard Chet, who's standing in the corner. I mean, the biggest thing I think is Chet just has to take a big step forward. Now, the other thing is if they want to acquire the guy that I kind of really wanted them to acquire, which is a shooting four. They are
Yeah.
a little bit limited in terms of matching salary they could send out. Although there's nothing stopping them from moving Hartenstein at some point too, if they wanted to.
I think
Um,
yeah, I
yeah,
think part of this was like they hit a single for now. They did the best they could in this market,
yeah,
and they filled up their cap balloon so that they are able to make that trade later with all these draft picks they have. And I think the key, I mean, you saw it with the Joe and Wiggins deals as well. I think what we're going to see on Hartenstein is a third-year team option. I don't
yeah.
know the details. I don't think have come out yet. I think on Wiggins, we're going to see a lot of funny money in the out years where it's non-guaranteed or team options or like other bullshit like that. If they didn't, that's an insane contract. So I'm hoping that's there. And declining money probably on Wiggins and Joe. And the reason for those is that, as you say, it gives them a store of tradable salary to put in deals later, and that's the one thing that they haven't had to really make that kind of home run deal. So it's either this or re-sign Gordon Hayward for 1 year, $33 million, which I don't think was going to be palatable for anybody.
No, and yeah, I guess if they wanted to go get a Jeremy Grant, all right, you could aggregate together. You got Kendrick Williams, you've got Usman Jang. Now Joe and Wiggins are both making 8 figures.
Yeah.
So that's like you really could go get that shooting four. I mean, you've then and maybe you do at that point just make. I mean that's just an amazing top seven. With Caruso and Hartenstein probably coming off the bench at
Right?
that point, or yeah. So yeah, they've got. I think the more I think about it, particularly with the draft pick assets that they have, they can really go get any other like starter at the four that comes on the market. Maybe that's Grant, maybe they're scared of Grant's, salary going out a little bit too far
Yeah.
as well. But I think or Kuzma I don't like as much of a fit, but yeah, any four who can shoot and defend and switch, those guys are rare, but they do exist.
Yeah. And then I do think that they are trying to set themselves a little bit for when Chet and Jalen Williams hit extensions in 2 years. That'll probably be max or max-ish numbers. And then Shea is going to get a big boost the year after. So they're trying to plan for when they are a more expensive team than they are now, too.
So would they be your pick right now in the West?
Well, I haven't done like my detailed analysis. I think they
Yeah.
are a great bet to have the best regular season record. Um, Now,
Yeah.
postseason series against a Dallas, against a Denver, that's let's see what this looks like.
They are still really, really reliant on J Dub and SGA. Like those are their only guys who can dribble on this team right now.
That's why you understand the Topic pick, because if he hits, he gives him another guy like that.
Yeah, but he won't play next year, obviously.
Yeah, he'll probably miss the whole year. And that was the thing that, their road not taken in free agency was to get a guy like that. The problem was that guy didn't exist really for them to go get. Like if they weren't going to get Paul George, who at 34 is maybe not the right fit for them anyway. Especially
I
if you
thought
need
he
to go
was.
out 4
I
years.
would have gone after him and just paid him. I think he was just too good, personally. But it doesn't sound like, I don't know whether it was they just knew he wasn't interested or they didn't want to make that attempt. But I would have done that. I don't know whether he would have preferred them or Philly.
Yeah, yeah. That was kind of the alternative. But once they didn't do that, I mean, Hartenstein was the best player that they could have realistically signed with their cap. I mean, the other thing, to get Paul George, they would have had to dump more money somewhere. They would have had to throw, I guess, throw Kenrich Williams overboard. Don't bother trading 5 seconds to draft Dylan Jones. You probably get most of the way there as I look at it.
Well, yeah, the math on it, once they traded for Caruso, they only could have offered him $41 million without having to trade Dort.
Right.
Like if they dumped Williams and Jang, they still would have only been at like $41 million. But I don't know, maybe that would have been in the ballpark, or they would have just had to move Dort too. They could have got a lot for Dort potentially. If you have Caruso, maybe he's expendable. Whatever. We're probably getting too far afield here. To me, I mean, I do really like what Dallas did a lot. I mean, can you explain to me why Quentin Grimes just like suddenly has no value? Is it just because he was injured last year and didn't do much?
I do wonder what the concern is with his knee. He's definitely like not a super shot creator, but as far as a 3-and-D guy who can come in and play a role and maybe play a role even in a pretty high level game, to have him on your book at $4.3 million is pretty sweet, right? So turning Hardaway into him is definitely a plus. Naji Marshall, I thought, was a really underrated player. So
do you like him or Jones better for them?
So the one thing they lost, I think, was perimeter defense. So that's the one thing you wonder about is who becomes that stopper now. I mean, it's not going to be Klay. I'm not sure if Naji Marshall is really that type of guy. So are you leaning on Grimes to do that? Does he become your fifth starter in that Jones role? That's probably the one question I have. Losing Jones, losing Green. I know Green was up and down on defense in the playoffs last year, but losing those two guys, like they did lose something to gain that shooting. I think they probably won on the gamble, but it was definitely. I mean, they made a 3-for-3 trade, and where they helped themselves, I think, was in their perimeter, their spacing. They're even harder to guard now because you're running a Doncic Lively pick and roll with Klay in the weak corner now. Like, good luck guarding that, right?
It's going to be impossible. Now, I mean, Klay, Luka, Kyrie all together defensively is probably not going to cut it in some matchups. Like, it wouldn't shock me if Klay is not closing games in the playoffs for that reason, at least in certain matchups. And yeah, I think going back to Jones versus Marshall, I think maybe I like Jones a little better against water bug point guards that he can envelop with his wingspan. I think Marshall's like a little tougher maybe against some bigger guys. Jones was very good though. I think Marshall flashed. I thought he was actually really good against Shea in the playoffs, but we've seen a little more proof of concept with Jones. Marshall to me is a better shooter. Can do some like grab and go stuff in transition as well, which will work well in their second unit. But I think that was very good value for him.
Might we see Dante Exum in more of this role too?
Well, at least until he misses his first 3 shots in the playoffs and then gets benched for the rest of the playoffs.
Well, those 3 shots will happen over a period of 97 minutes, though. So it'll be like 4.5 games before.
Yeah. Well, Dante, I mean, like both he and Grimes, like they actually aren't really counting on those guys that much. And also Jaden Hardy can probably be better for them as well this year, at least in the regular season. So they have a lot of depth, a lot of ways they can play. So I mean, I guess they're starting Klay and PJ Washington though, or maybe they end up starting Marshall and bringing in PJ off the bench. I would actually even just kind of make it fluid from game to game. Although I don't know if the old egos can handle that.
Yeah, I'm wondering what they told Klay about a starting role when they were recruiting him.
I'm not wondering. They told him he's going to start. It would be shocking to me if he doesn't start, especially some of the ego that he evinced it in Golden State about that. All right, who are you saying we need to talk about next? I think we got to most of them.
Have we really tackled the Nuggets?
Yeah, I mean that's the next one. I'll frame it to you this way. You've been in this position in a small market, although Denver's actually not a small market, and their ownership certainly has plenty of money. Is there any way to justify them not retaining KCP? When you consider the guaranteed money that he got, which is 3 years, $66 million, last year player option in Orlando. Is there any way to justify it from a basketball flexibility standpoint other than just saying they're being cheap?
I have a really hard time with that. Because I mean it's not like the money's going to be used somewhere else. It's just not going to get used. They could have set it up so that he opted in this year at 15 million and then they did an extension off of that, right? They could have done it that way and gotten to 66 pretty easily. Or gotten to some other number on a 4-year deal that was more than 66, but like paid him till he was 35. There were ways to do this. So if they had been blown out of water by 4 years, 120 million or something, I would have been like, okay, all right, fine, you can't do that. But to lose him on a 3 for 66 deal is kind of embarrassing, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. And it just, the idea, oh man, you're going to be over the second apron. I would buy that if they had assets to make some kind of a big move, right? Like Golden State, for example. Let's say Golden State was a little bit better, right? And they're losing. Like, let's say that Golden State's as good as Denver right now. They lose Klay because they don't want to pay him. Golden State has a bunch of assets to trade to get better. So the lack of flexibility really hurts them. I don't feel that way about Denver. I mean, I think like they have the best starting five in basketball right now. You can keep it together. And I also think that they're kind of focused on this. Oh, well, what about, we got to get sustainable success. We're going to draft all these guys. And like Jokic's going to be 30 this year. Like he's got 2-3 more years. I think
it is such a disservice to his prime, what they have done. They managed to get one championship out of it, but because this has been a continual thing for years where they've either avoided the tax or kind of shirked it. And then at the same time made some really unnecessary decisions on paying their own guys.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're going to be this cheap, then be cheap when you're giving out the contracts on extensions too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that Zeke Naji deal is killing them. Because if you don't want to spend money, you can't afford to pay Zeke Naji $9 million to sit at the end of the bench, right? You can't capitulate that easily on Porter's extension when people had their questions about him health-wise to begin with. So you didn't even know what his market was going to be as a free agent, and they just went all in on that one. So
just giving him like the straight up max without even negotiating, I thought was pretty insane. To be fair, he gets hurt and he hasn't been the same player. But
yeah, there was a partial on the end of it that I think it triggered when they won the championship.
It did, yeah. It was 12 million out of whatever 37 million guaranteed. So I am. I mean, I'm not going to say flabbergasted because this is kind of how they've conducted themselves. I'm not going to totally shovel dirt on this yet, right? Like, let's say they have young assets available. They're not going to be hard capped now, in all likelihood. And, perhaps they make a move that brings back more salary, or they use the tax mid-level to get someone who's pretty decent. I was like, oh, what if they use the tax mid-level on Gary Harris to bring him back, right? And instead... and tell him that he's going to start.
I thought they could have done KCP as a sign and trade for Gary Harris.
Yeah. I mean, that was like Batadze and Harris going back to Orlando when they are like going to be like the 11th and 12th men was weird to me that no one else could like would get in on those guys. I think those guys are like obvious rotation players to me, but
yeah,
that the Magic just have an insane amount of financial flexibility right now. It's just like coming out their ears how deep this team is going to be.
Yeah, and Goga doesn't even affect their cap because he's a minimum cap hold.
Yeah. But yeah, so Denver, they have assets. They still have a 2030 pick swap and a 2031 first. And they've got Peyton Watson, who I think a lot of teams would be very interested in possibly acquiring. Although, are we sure that they're going to re-sign Aaron Gordon at this rate and not just like promote Peyton Watson into that role? I mean, and that's, they do have like the fiscal issue of having to re-sign Gordon at age 30, coming off a player option next year as well. So to me, so maybe they can do something here to bring in another starter, and we're talking about them being in decent shape at the trade deadline and going into the playoffs, and they still do have the best player. And I'm still not even sure that, like, they're clearly below Oklahoma City. They're clearly below Dallas because, like, number 15 is just that good.
Right.
And hey, maybe Christian Braun learns to shoot a lot better this year. And, maybe Vlatko Čančar can give them something off the bench. And Julian Strawther emerges. Like, again, I'm not, like, totally ruling this out. But it would be wonderful. Like, all those things could have still happened and you re-signed KCP.
Yeah, exactly. But instead, they did the Naji deal and the Reggie Jackson deal that they had to give up 3 seconds just to get rid of. So just a lot of questions there right now.
Anybody else that's really speaking to you here that you wanted to talk about? Anything that you particularly liked or didn't like?
What do you think of the Bulls reset?
Yeah, it reminds me of when, like, they say to, like, just reset your router and then it still has the same problem after you hit the reset button. Like, that's kind of what it reminds me of. It's like all right, we're going to reset, but it's still... I mean, they should be bad enough now to get into the 2025 draft pretty high. You'd think. It seems like DeRozan's not coming back there.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, like, there's reporting from Will Gottlieb that management ownership, I guess, really wanted them to push for the playoffs, or more accurately play in last year, but not moving DeRozan either last off season or I mean, they're maybe they'll get a little something for him in a sign and trade, but it's not going to be much. And they're so close to the tax now too that they can't really take money back for DeRozan. Like, that would have been great if they could have maybe got some value from taking back money in a DeRozan sign and trade that other teams didn't want, right? Like, let's say if you sign and trade him to Miami and you take back Duncan Robinson or something like that and you get some value for that. But it seems like that ship sailed now. I don't like Jalen Smith there is like at least the concept of a guy that would fit okay with Josh Giddey. I don't mind that too much, but yeah. I mean, they still seem to be going absolutely nowhere, and they're not rebuilding as much as like a team like Washington is.
Right. Because they didn't nuke it, and they couldn't get anything for Levine or Vooch, so they're just kind of stuck where they are.
Yeah, and history has shown that these rebuilds that begin, because this is what I've always said. I've said this going back to when Charlotte was doing this in like 2017, 2018, not trading Kemba Walker.
Mm-hmm.
The rebuild is coming whether you want it to or not.
Yeah.
So why don't you let it happen under more favorable circumstances by trading the assets that are good, making your draft pick better 2 years earlier?
Yeah. That was the thing in Memphis where we lucked out, that we tried to hang on, because it is really emotionally, it's like turning around an ocean liner for an organization to make that pivot. And that, because it was, if you're being logical, it was obvious we needed to do that in after the San Antonio series in 17. And so we didn't bring back Zach, we didn't bring back Tony, but we didn't trade Mark and Mike either. And that was the thing we needed. Like, we just needed to start over. And we ended up being like, Mike missed the whole next season anyway, so we ended up being bad enough that we, got a top 4 pick anyway. And then they held their value, so we were still able to trade them for
Well,
for
and
value.
they were also under contract still for longer, right? Like, the problem with DeRozan was he's going to be a free agent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they weren't expiring deals. We actually did trade our expiring deals those seasons, but it was like, James Ennis for a second.
Well, and you're also hanging on to the best era in franchise history that included multiple 50-win seasons and multiple playoff trips to the second round or further.
You mean
They were
we
hanging
weren't?
on to the one year they were the 6th seed and got ceremony like the worst gentleman sweep in NBA history, basically.
Fair points.
Actually, this is a question. No one's been talking about Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how good are they going to be next year? Like, I think, like, if I really go through it, like, are they going to be, like, the 5th seed?
Possibly.
When I go, like, I might,
What?
I mean, Phoenix has done absolutely nothing other than lose Eric Gordon, right? Like, I mean, they're big losers. They haven't been able to make a trade. Lakers haven't really gotten any better. I don't know.
Yeah.
DeRozan maybe could change that a little bit. I actually don't hate his fit there as much as some people do. Golden State looking like they're going to take a step back unless they can make a big trade at this point. I don't know. Maybe they're not taking a step back, but Steph and Draymond are a year older, so there's no reason to believe they'll be better.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
maybe it is really New Orleans, I guess, and Memphis kind of pushing for that 5-6 seed.
and Houston maybe, yeah. But like the Pacific Division is just falling into the ocean, basically, right? So it's
Sacramento's still there. Like they'll be competent.
It's interesting. You know, what is Zach Edey in the NBA? I think that's a really interesting question that we're going to start finding out at Summer League since he's not playing for Team Canada now. Grizzlies do have. It looks like they have some money just under the tax to pay Luke Kennard, and that he's fishing for a bigger deal that he's probably not going to get. But what is this team right now? Like on paper, Ja, Jaren, Desmond Bane, that's a really good trio, right? Marcus Smart is hopefully a good fourth starter, but what is Ja going to be this year? Is he going to stay healthy? Is he going to stay out of the club? How does Jaren Jackson fit with Zach Edey, or does Jaren have to play 5? And then they have this whole problem they've had where they can't really find a big wing who can straddle 3 and 4. Still a lot of questions there. Still wondering about if there's a trade coming from the Grizzlies. They still have some assets they can do stuff with. And yeah, kind of low key, interesting team. Been a little too quiet, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of talent. I mean, can Vince Williams and G.G. Jackson build on what they did last year? I actually like Scottie Pippen Jr. pretty well as like maybe a new backup point guard type of guy. Like they have some young guys that got some experience last year. Jaren got a lot better at shot creation, maybe not passing, but shot creation last year. So how it all fits together, I think, is going to be pretty fascinating. Let's take a few questions here if you're interested in it. You can see them, I think, on your screen also. Talking about Denver, Rap Stallion says, do you think they figured that if KCP couldn't hold up against Ant, then they didn't like their odds against some of the West teams? I mean, I just like KCP is a two-way shooting guard. I'm not sure like what else you're doing there. And that's one matchup. I think if you play that series with Jamal Murray healthy, the Denver still probably wins it. Even if you play that series in the condition that Murray was in, Denver probably wins it a fair amount of the time. I actually really like the way that Denver matches up against Dallas and OKC because I don't think either of those teams have anyone to guard Jokic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think that, and I mean, there are definitely matchups where you need someone who can guard the ball like a small point guard. They don't have anyone to guard that. I mean, I guess actually I'm not that worried about their defense. I think Braun is going to be fine there. Like, you can even argue he's as good or better than KCP.
Yeah, there's just no shooting in Denver. Like, what are they doing for that? Yeah.
Well, you look at their 3-point shooting numbers in game 6 and 7 against Minnesota, and your conclusion is like, let's let our second best 3-point shooter go. I guess probably third best, secondly, but one of the 3 guys. I mean, you're going to have a starting lineup that has 2 guys next to Jokic that don't really shoot threes at all.
That's going to be challenging. But hey, if you have Westbrook coming off the bench, that'll help.
I actually think he won't be a bad fit there, but Who is? Let me. Here's another one. What's happened with Miles Bridges? Is he's got to go back to Charlotte and they're just haggling over the details right now?
I wonder if Detroit is still involved there, because that was the other
It
team whose
seems.
name you heard a lot. But
Yeah,
it's
it
interesting
seems.
that
Yeah.
nothing's gotten. You haven't really even heard a peep about what might be happening there. So yeah, it's possible he's just too radioactive right now.
Well, in Detroit, they've got 26 million in cap space, but they did sign Harris. They did draft Holland. They have Asar Thompson. Like, they actually have a number of guys at those positions now. Not to say that I loved the Hardaway Jr. and Tobias Harris acquisitions for Detroit, but they still have plenty of money.
Yeah, I wasn't that bothered by the Harris deal. I just think they needed some guys around who could help the other guys play real basketball. And then because it's a 2-year deal, Harris kind of turns into a trade chip next year. So that one didn't bother me.
Math guy Dave says, "Can we already say the Trajan Langdon era is a failure?" Hey, they got the number one guy on John's board at 5.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty much. Nate's not going to be out unless they lose Simone Fontecchio, and then that's going to swing him 180 degrees.
No, I don't think we can already say that. Like, this is, I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen anyone else making deals to pick up first rounders and salary dumps either yet. It's more, and I don't even think the Harris deal kills them. The Hardaway and Harris deals are more like, what does this say about their philosophy, both in terms of negotiations and who you think is good? I think the stated goal is like, oh, Tim Hardaway can actually help us. Like, we need shooting around these guys. Like, he's just like not that kind of shooter. He's gonna like come in and jack bad shots and not make that many of them, as opposed to like, oh, he's gonna really space the floor for our young guys. And Harris is another guy who kind of needs the ball. He wants to like get into the mid range a little bit. Why you had to pay him that much, I have no understanding of whatsoever. Like, what was his other offer above the mid level? Why do you need to double that? I don't really get that. So it's more like, I don't think these are like, complete miserable things that are going to like hamstring them forever. And they also got Fred Vincent, which I think actually really, really matters.
That was their biggest acquisition by far. I mean, with the guys they have on
Yeah.
this team, I mean, my goodness, yeah. The thing with, I mean, that Hardaway trade, obviously they got, I mean, 2025 Toronto second, like that's a good pick to get if you're not getting a first. That's about as good as it gets as far as what second round draft equity you might get, other than acquiring a Pistons pick, I guess. And then I just don't think they believed in Grimes and wanted to pay him. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Clear, like if they thought Grimes was a long-term piece and we're going to extend him, then no way they make that trade.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to see how he plays in Dallas. I mean, maybe his knee is just like totally fucked. But I mean, the player that he was is actually in New York 2 years ago in the playoffs when he's guarding Jimmy Butler and shooting and playing 25 minutes a game. Like, that's a very good player. And like, that's exactly who you want to have around your young core. And like, I don't know that the return there, like, you could have just taken, I would have held on to Grimes and say, all right, we'll take 1 second for Hardaway in the dump rather than giving him up, because it's one of these things where, all right, fine, you don't want to pay him. Let him play this year. And if he sucks, then he just leaves and you don't pay him, right? Like, if you're not convinced, like, I think he has the potential to actually be a great fit around some of their guys. Richard says, where do Ron Holland's minutes come from with this roster? Richard, are you talking about wait, who is their G League affiliate now? Damn it, I had the joke all teed up, and because it's not Grand Rapids anymore, right? Isn't that's now the Nuggets? So Detroit has like
Grand
their
Rapids
own
is the
G League
Nuggets.
affiliate
Detroit
in Detroit.
I believe that's correct. Yes, Motor City.
All right, so does that mean now that the Pistons can't wear those terrible Motor City alternates too?
Ooh,
They gotta.
Yeah, we need a rule. We
yeah,
need
the
a
Motor
ruling on
City
that.
Drive. Kyle says in the comments. So yeah, I mean, I do agree that it will be a little bit tough. Guys will get injured. Like, he'll get a chance. Guys will get traded. They'll be terrible again towards the end of the season. Like they have no shooting again. Like they're not going to challenge for the playoffs at all. I think that would be. I mean, unless JB can just turn this team into like some sort of a defensive monster and they get competent that way. What did you think about the Cade auto? Oh, sorry, what were we going to say?
Nothing important.
Okay, what were you going to say about, or what would you say about the Cade max extension? If that, I'm pretty sure that's assumed to happen at this point.
I think it was inevitable that it was going to happen, and I can't say I really like it. I don't think he's really demonstrated that he's that guy, and so it seems a little odd to me to go to that point already. It also, I mean, the kind of Tyrese Maxey analogy. I mean, it takes him out of some cap room scenarios next year too by committing to that. So that's the other interesting part of that. Now his cap hold isn't as low because he was the number 1 pick. So
his cap hold was going to be basically at the max. Yeah. So no, I think that's ultimately I don't think there is much opportunity cost there.
Now I'm
it's
just
more
hoping
about
they
just
got,
like
there's I believe there's no supermax on his, and it's for the full 5.
Oh, that's interesting.
I'm not.
Yeah, I think this has significant enough upside that I would do it, just because I'm like, what the fuck else are you doing?
Yeah, that's
right?
the biggest thing in Detroit. Yeah, without a
doubt.
doubt.
That was why I was on board with the Zion extension too,
Mm-hmm.
where it's just like, if he doesn't work out, then it's not like having him on the roster is really at this number is really going to matter that much. He's also like a pretty high floor guy too, so at a minimum, he'll be a guy who can shoot okay, play make a little bit, and won't be terrible on defense even if he doesn't work out to be a number 1. And he'll be, with the cap rising, he'll be making under the 25% max basically when he's like 29.
Yeah.
So that's, if he does turn out to even be an all-star, this is a great contract. And I think he's got a 50-50 chance of being an all-star at some point during this deal. Would you say you believe in that or no?
Even if it's 30-70, I might do it in Detroit's position.
Let's see. Yeah. All right. That really got us on a nice little Detroit tangent there.
Yeah.
If DeRozan does make it to LA, what do you think of his fit there?
So the Lakers' biggest issue is that they had too many players who sucked. So just getting anybody who doesn't, I think, is an upgrade for them. And then there is a fit issue, especially in lineups where LeBron and Reeves are both out there too. But I just think there's enough minutes over the course that might become an issue in the playoffs more. I think through the course of the regular season, that's going to be a manageable thing.
So you might say, well, all right, like defensively, how well is it going to work? And, he doesn't really shoot threes that well, but, they're starting Rui Hachimura next to LeBron right now. I think like they do need another guy that you really need to account for offensively. And DeRozan is that. And I think, they always are going to have this issue with LeBron where he actually can be a little bit difficult to fit around if he's going to play the 3, because you really need like that 3-and-D guy next to him. And if you bring in DeRozan, you're not necessarily getting that. I think Caleb Martin actually would have been a wonderful fit for them, but
yes,
that he wasn't on LeBron's take a pay cut for magical list.
He didn't make the list.
Valanciunas was, of course, but not Caleb Martin.
That's a bullet dodge for LA. I love JV. I think he's going to help Washington, kind of get where they're trying to go. But his fit in LA for what they were going to kind of give up, I didn't like that at all.
No. Well, yeah, I mean, it obviously probably didn't have legs if he was going to sign for $10 million in Washington.
Yeah.
So, but I like just to have one more guy that like you really have to deal with defensively. And they're never like a great spacing team anyway. So, and maybe he doesn't close on some nights, but like they don't actually have like great pick and roll play. They're LeBron is like kind of okay there on some nights, but he also is not, like an amazing pick and roll operator. Like I thought they struggled to get shots at the end of games. DeRozan can maybe give them a little bit of that as well. LeBron has also become a much better spot up shooter. So
Yeah,
that works a
that's a
little bit
big thing.
better.
Yeah, LeBron is the spacing now, right? Like if you have LeBron and Russell, then it's like okay, you put in DeRozan in fourth quarters instead of Reeves maybe, and play like that.
Well, Russell's got to be gone. I think. I think my thinking is to because LeBron is not going to take start for like 25 million, even to give DeRozan the mid level. That's what it would have to be. I think at this point, if it's a sign and trade, they got to move Russell. I think that Nets trade exception is probably calling everyone's name. That like $20 million trade exception they have. But I actually like DeRozan's fit. Okay, like they do need another creator who's better than Austin Reeves, in my opinion. And quite frankly, if you get DeRozan, you can also trade Austin Reeves, which I actually think they should be much more seriously considering than they have been.
Just
I
in
think
terms
he's
of
one of them.
selling high.
Well, selling high, he's only got 2 years left on his deal. I think he's really like a very good third guard. If you get DeRozan, you don't really need what he does. Like if you could trade him and get, more like traditional 3-and-D type of guys, I would be very interested in doing that if I were them. Because it seems like he's like very valued. And also, if you get DeRozan, his value goes down this year. And so I know he's like this big organizational win that they love there and the fans love him, but that's a great reason to trade him. Like I think he's one of the most overrated players in basketball right now.
Got to clear room for Max Christie.
Hey, he could be good. You didn't like that contract?
No. I didn't. I did. I mean, like you're a win now team, and you're kind of committing. It's almost like a Zeke Naji deal. Like you're committing to this late pick who hasn't really done anything. Bidding against who? Like what? I don't know. It just felt like what are we doing?
I would have taken, if they hadn't agreed to him, I would have taken a flyer on him at that type of money. Like you don't think he could be a rotation player? If he's a rotation player at any point in the next 4 years, that's a good deal. And he's the archetype that you want to bet on, in contrast to a backup center.
I mean, he plays a more valuable position. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't think his shot's broken. I think he's got good athleticism. I don't know.
I think he's fine as long as he's standing perfectly still. And anything that requires
like shooting the ball or defending,
shooting the ball or dribbling the ball or reacting to things that are happening on the court. Yeah.
Let's close on this. When did the Kawhi trade rumors start?
Oh, well, I mean, historically, the James Harden rumor should start first, especially with him being on a player option after this season. The question is, does Kawhi just want to be in LA?
Well, he may not have a choice. I mean, the right thing for the Clippers would be to trade him. They're not going to contend this year. I don't know what they can do to acquire a player to get back into contention. I mean, I guess there is, maybe they've already sold all the tickets for the Intuit Dome. Maybe Ballmer doesn't care. It would be an incredible. There would be a lot of non-basketball factors that would have to go into that decision, I would say.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, how do you tank when you don't control your next 5 drafts?
Let's see. So who has these picks?
I mean, it would be trading Kawhi to Oklahoma City, basically, right? And then you regain control of 25, 26, and 27.
Yeah, I don't think Oklahoma City is too interested in Kawhi. I mean, I actually would, as them, I would be much more interested in Paul George than Kawhi.
Yeah.
I think George is a little more reliable.
So, yeah, they're just in a really difficult spot in these coming years because they're probably not going to be better than like a back-end playoff team in any of these upcoming years, but they have no real tanking equity either unless they can get these picks back somehow.
All right, we can pack it in here. I want to remind y'all about Dunked On Prime, where you can catch every Hollinger and Duncan. You can catch every Dunked On Prime episode with me and Danny. We wrap up every signing, talk about every team, every transaction, every night of free agency. We're going to talk about every single roster player in the summer league as well. That's always a really fun podcast to do. And then outlooks for all 30 teams with the local expert. And well over 200 podcasts per year. And John has not found this particularly compelling, but he already knows about the benefits of Dunked On Prime. And you've got 2 more days to get in on that 25% off with code MOCK offseason 2024. Link to that is in the show notes. And we'll be back tonight on Dunked On Prime with Danny. Till then.